really big news coming from San Jose Earthquakes that Bruce Arena will be taking over as head coach and sporting director for the club starting in 2025. And again, my name is Kevin. I'm joined by Luis, and together we're the Quakesaholics. So, Luis, what was your initial gut reaction as soon as you read the headline?
To be completely honest, it wasn't very positive. I don't know why. I just felt like it kind of reminded me too much of Matias Almeida in the sense of it's like a big name, a big personality. Like he's done big things at big clubs. I just immediately started questioning whether that approach would work at Quakes. And we'll get into obviously from then, kind of look more into Bruce Arena and see what kind of information we find out. But yeah, that was my initial impression. How about you?
Similar in the sense that my first take was that I was not super enthusiastic about the signing. I think it was good to get a big name, but kind of like what you said, that I felt like there maybe could have been a better option. I thought the signing was very early on in terms of we're still in the playoffs. There's still other head coaches at other teams that could be let go. I mean, we saw that with Jim Curtin, I think a couple of days ago, and now with Miami's early exit, who knows, maybe Tata Martino will also be on the market. So Bruce Arena wasn't my first choice. Definitely, I think more happy about that than something like Greg Berhalter.
Kind of also thought about like Bob Bradley kind of situation where it's like
Yeah,
American guy, like just American. Let's just get some like American coach that every American fan knows about and put them in an MLS position and comes with success sometimes. But I was skeptical. That's all.
and I think for me, I also had a little bit of bias just with Bruce Arena having coached probably the best years for LA Galaxy. So there's definitely some salt for me there. But I tried being more quiet about it on social media and just kind of taking in what people were saying and actually looking into the background of not just with Galaxy, but with DC United, with New England Revolution. And my opinions have definitely changed. I'll say that much.
Yeah, definitely. I have sweetened up to the appointment. I mean, obviously, I still have my questions, and I'm not gonna put my money on it and say that it's gonna be a success or gonna make the playoffs. But definitely, I am more supportive of it for sure.
One of the keys in this news is that it's not just the head coaching position, it's also the sporting director position, which, at least from recent memory, I don't know if we've had a dedicated sporting director. I actually had to look up what a sporting director did. And from what I've read, it sounds like the key task is in managing transfers of players to and from the team, which I think in more recent years has fallen more on the general manager. So I think it'll be interesting to see what a coach that can actually have more autonomy in which players come in and out will have on the club.
From what I read previously, it seemed like Bruce Arena was also the sporting director at New England Revolution. So
Mm-hmm.
this is probably something that Bruce Arena wanted and maybe was non-negotiable for him. Probably this is something that he would want is having some power over transfers. I know that this is a really big topic in Europe. Is there's this kind of traditionally the manager also has a lot of say in who comes in and who goes out of the club. Some clubs are structured differently, and they have like in the San Jose Earthquakes a general manager, so there's some longevity, some continuity to like regardless of who the coach is.
Mm-hmm.
But it will be interesting, and I from to kind of go back to also what you were saying. I also don't remember anyone else being this having this role as sporting director. I know Matias Almeida brought in some of his guys, but yeah, I don't think it went as far as him being the sporting director or anything like that.
Like we mentioned, this happened a couple days ago now, and so since then, I think Bruce Arena has had either two or three, either press conferences or interviews. So some of the more notable ones, I'm just going to read some of these quotes. He said, "It's certainly going to be a challenge in San Jose, but I'm pretty confident in the support that ownership and management has given me. We're hopeful we can move forward with the team and make them a lot more competitive in 2025." And then he went on to say, "There's going to be change. In a short period of time, you can't make a lot of changes, but we'll certainly make the changes that we think will improve the roster. But also the ownership has given us the opportunity to improve the everyday environment. Facilities for the first team are going to be much improved. Dining facility, team meeting room, second training field." And then lastly, when asked about what the goals were for this first year and the project as a whole, he said, "Immediate goal is to make the playoffs that year. We can't have grand ambitions if we can't build a team to a point where they are competitive enough to qualify for the playoffs. And then when that happens, there are certainly great opportunities ahead. We'll take it one step at a time. We're not going to talk too much. We have to go to work and try to make the team and the organization better. So from those quotes, it does sound like he is going to have a say in making a lot of changes and that changes will be coming, but that we should also have our expectations tempered in how quickly that happens. And I like that there wasn't any promise about winning MLS Cup or Supporters Shield or anything like that. I think
Yeah. Hmm.
a couple of the past coaches we've had come in here with guns blazing saying they're going to win this and that, and then it never amounts to anything. I think Bruce Arena definitely has his feet planted on the ground. I think part of that is just from having experience in MLS and just being realistic that this is a really difficult league to be successful in. So I like that. Where we're at right now, it should be take everything one step at a time, take everything one game at a time.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting to see how much starting off on the front foot, he's already kind of speaking up about John Fisher.
Mm-hmm.
I have some quotes here as well where he said, John Fisher in the front office has already assured me that they're dedicating resources to help improve the club. At meetings with John Fisher strongly indicates that he's going to support the club. We don't expect to be Inter Miami, believe me. But we're going to move our club up the ladder to position ourselves to a much more competitive team. And I believe there's a great commitment on part of the owner as well as our front office. So I don't know if Bruce Arena is aware of how, especially, I mean, even it goes even bigger than the earthquakes and just kind of the Bay Area, the reputation that John Fisher holds. But it's good to see that he did kind of have some confidence, and I don't think that he would join this project if he didn't have those assurances. You know what I mean?
And I do believe the things that John Fisher has said. I know that people are hard on John Fisher in terms of spending, but the reality is that the spending has been increasing steadily. It just hasn't been as
Hmm.
astronomical as Inter Miami or Toronto FC, where they're just throwing money at
Yeah,
the roster. But it has been getting better.
yeah, and then obviously like it's what you do with the money, where's the money being
Exactly.
allocated, and also maybe it's also about like some spending that wasn't done previously. It's complicated, but I do think that the fact that he has the confidence and is, I mean, explicitly talking about how he feels like there will be support from the ownership is a
Hmm.
positive sign. And I think that a talking point for the San Jose Earthquakes for a few years now has been that when there's a general manager who maybe has a few misses, maybe John Fisher will start to be a bit more like a penny pincher if he doesn't feel like there's enough consistency from the general manager. So it'll be interesting to see how the spending plays out with this new dynamic of the head coach also being the sporting director and being the one who is signing off on these signings. I think that'll be interesting to see how John Fisher reacts to that and how much, if his economic support for that changes in any way.
I mean, we watch every game, we follow everything that there is to follow about this team, and at least me personally, I can't tell you what is the identity of the San Jose Earthquakes on the field. And so when you don't have an identity that is clear as an owner, why you're going to just pour money into the roster, and I think with Bruce Arena that could change. And I think that more than anything is what swayed me to thinking that this Bruce Arena signing was a good one, because now we have an opportunity of actually building out a project and building out an identity. So I'm excited.
I think that it would simplify the process a bit more. I mean, this kind of does start to come into question the role of Chris Leach moving forward. Fisher's at the top, Leach is right below him, and then the coach is below Leach. But I feel
Hmm.
like this kind of starts to reorganize that dynamic
Hmm.
and structure.
And yeah, we've been talking about Bruce Arena and projects and this and that, and I wouldn't be surprised if Quakes fans weren't aware of what Bruce Arena has done in MLS, because he's been here for a really long time and he's spent most of his time in the Eastern Conference, and just the nature of how schedules align, you just end up not paying attention as much to the Eastern Conference. So I did want to go over some of that previous history that Bruce Arena has had, going all the way back to DC United, which was 1996 to 1998, which was a great time for DC. They won two MLS Cups, the CONCACAF Champions, and Open Cup. I think analyzing that is a little bit of a stretch just because it was so different back then. There were only 10 teams in the league. There was really nothing else to compare to. He also had a short time with New York Red Bulls from 2006 2007, which, I mean, Red Bulls have never won anything, so that wasn't a successful time. But the biggest thing was Galaxy from 2008 to 2016. probably their golden years. That was the dynasty that they had in the early 2010s, winning 3 MLS Cups in 4 years, which hurts to say, but it's just the reality that he was a great coach there. I actually didn't remember was that in 2008, right before Bruce picked up the team, Galaxy finished second to last in the West. And then the very next year, in 2009, they topped the West. And so then I
Wow.
just went, yeah, crazy, right? And so then I went and I compared the rosters to see like, okay, like how much change actually happened. And if I counted correctly, of the 25 players on that 2009 roster, only 10 of them were there the year before. And so that's a huge change.
Oh,
That's
massive change.
yeah. Yeah, it's like 60% of the roster just got overhauled in the offseason. And that's kind of what the Quakes need if they want to make a huge jump in the standings, which, like he said, isn't realistic in the short term. Just the way that our roster has right now, it's like we just have too many contracts, and so we're not going to be able to offload half of the players. But then when he went to New England, he did a similar thing where in 2018, they had not made the playoffs. And then Bruce Arena got there in 2019, and only with 7 changes, which, I mean, 7 changes is a lot, but it's not as much as with the Galaxy. They instantly made it to the playoffs. And then by 2021, which is his 4th year at the club, they won the Supporters' Shield. And I do want to point that out, that it did take 4 years to get his first trophy with New England, and it was the same thing with the Galaxy. So again, don't expect overnight changes. As much as we want to spam 2025 MLS Cup champions in comment sections, it's just not realistic. But change can definitely come. And especially for that New England side, by the time that they got to that Supporters' Shield, which was 4 years in, the original roster to then only had 5 players actually stick around. So Bruce Arena, when he says that he's ready to make changes and cut players and swap everyone out, like, he means it. He means business. And I think that is also something that we should be looking forward to.
Yeah, definitely exciting to kind of consider what changes we'll see to this roster at the end of this season that just finished. Well, that finished for us, the end of the regular season. We were talking about how, is after Ewell scored that goal at LA, is that the last we'll see of Ewell?
Mm-hmm.
There's been these interviews with the Boba talking about how there's not really any consideration of the future of these next couple seasons because, even before the confirmation of Bruce Arena at the club, it was kind of because of the performance of the team this season. Everyone is just kind of knowing that there's going to be a lot of calls for change and a lot of, reevaluation that's going to happen in this offseason. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. And I do think that it does seem like where Bruce Arena goes, he tends to find success. And I think that part of my initial impressions, to be honest, were because it did kind of bring back, memories of Almeida and, this guy who's a big personality. He's seen as a good, get the team to fight and he can, get that Warriors mentality and he has that winning mentality, which I think kind of is reminiscent of, at least so far, what I've heard about Bruce Arena is
Mm-hmm.
sort of what he's about, a good man manager. But I will say that it's also not the same because where Matias Almeida was coming to MLS, a league which questionably he underappreciated in terms of how competitive it was. Bruce Arena is an MLS veteran. He
Mm-hmm.
has been in MLS throughout his career, through multiple eras, and he does seem to consistently compete. And in teams where it's not like it's guaranteed, right? Revs, correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, the Supporters' Shield that he won with Revs was their first piece of silverware, or at least MLS silverware. So to go into a team and to do what he did there, and also not just to win the Supporters' Shield, but to break the record for the most points at the time,
Mm-hmm.
is extremely impressive.
Going with an MLS veteran was a good move from the Quakes. I mean, I feel like we've tried just about everything now, with Stare being a European coach, and then Matias being a South American, Central American coach, and then we tried going with a Quakes alumni in Luchi Gonzalez and then in Ian Russell, and those experiments just did not work the way that we wanted. And so I think this also represents a shift to just going with what we know works. I don't remember when he said this, but I do remember Bruce Arena mentioning that part of the evaluation of which players to bring into the club would also be on bringing in MLS veterans, which I think is a good idea. Hopefully we can steal some highly talented players from other teams, which improves our roster and then also weakens theirs.
Obviously, like there is kind of an elephant in the room, I suppose, as to how things ended with New England Revolution. And I know that, it kind of reminded me of the Jonah Mensah situation when
Mm-hmm.
he was put out of the team for a few weeks. Obviously, this is, a much larger, much more public fallout. There is really not much information that I can find, and even from the players themselves, there seems to be a lack of transparency as to what really happened. I did read some quotes earlier about Bruce Arena saying that part of him having that title of coach and as sporting director, he felt like he had, a lot more eyes on him and just had a lot of expectations and maybe was set to higher standard or what have you. And right, like me and you, we none of us, no one really knows what he said or what happened. One thing that I did notice and read about was how loyal the players were to him after he was put on an administrative leave. I saw an article from The Athletic saying how a lot of the players were refusing to train and were demanding an explanation from the team. And I also was kind of, kind of skimming through the New England subreddit as well, just to get kind of like a fan's perspective of that situation. And it seems like a lot of them were not really happy with the transparency for one, and also it seemed like a lot of the players didn't have much faith in Richie, who I assume was kind of like an Ian Russell situation where he was a coach on the coaching staff and took
Mm-hmm.
over the role. And I know the Revs kind of have been pretty poor, honestly. I also read some quotes about Carlos Gil, and obviously a very big name player in this league. He's talking about how, reflecting on his experience with Bruce, he said he has been very good with me. I have a great relationship. I'm the captain of this team, so I try to represent the entire dressing room when I speak to him. And honestly, I have a very good relationship with him. I think everyone here knows Bruce. He's been here for I don't even know how many years. It's my 5th year with him, and it's been a very good experience. I also heard other players talking about how, they've never really had any problems with Bruce Arena. That isn't to say that that also carries over to his relationships with maybe other people or other staff or other people in the organization, but positive sign for him as a coach that he does have players fighting for him. And I think that it kind of goes into him and his strengths as a coach being the relationships that he can build and the mentality that he has, and kind of like this Mourinho-esque maybe figure of someone who the players have a lot of respect for.
There isn't much on the situation. The closest I've found knowing what happened was actually I heard it today from Landon Donovan. He actually started a new podcast with Tim Howard, and what Donovan said was that it was apparently something that someone in Bruce Arena's staff had said, and then either Bruce Arena like repeated it or approved of it, and then that was the falling out with New England Revolution. But then Landon also did vouch for him, saying that from his time with him, he said that Bruce Arena was a really good guy, and sometimes he says things that get him in trouble publicly, but that since that New England experience, Bruce Arena has done a lot of work in correcting himself and educating himself on, what can and can't be said. So yeah, a good track record with players for sure. And just with any signing, there's always pros and cons. So did you have any preliminary thoughts on the pros and cons now that you've had more time to sit with the news?
I think that this is going to be a coach that the players have a lot of respect for, and I think that this is going to be a coach that all the players will have heard about. And I believe that one thing that is consistent with Bruce Arena is he has a lot of experience in MLS. He has won in MLS, and he also seems to focus on creating a winner's mentality, I guess. I think that him as a man manager, it seems to me from what I've read so far that that's one of his strong suits. And so I'm excited to see that with the San Jose Earthquakes. I think that there have been times where, especially coming off the season that we just had, you have Jack Scahan going into interviews and saying how we know we're better than this, but for some reason or another, whether it's mental block or something, they just can't seem to really put it all together when they're out on the field playing. And I think that belief and confidence that we know these players can have, like we saw during the Leagues Cup run, is something that can be instilled in them from a coach like this, with this reputation, with this stature in the league, and hoping that leads to success, or at least improvements and a playoff position.
Yeah, and I don't think that it's a stretch to believe that we will find success under Bruce Arena. Everywhere he's gone to, he has found success, and then there's a pattern that also when he does leave the club, that club typically declines in performance. So I think that's the first pro that I see. The other thing is that it's an opportunity for a good roster shakeup. And at this point, I do think I trust someone like Bruce Arena more than Chris Leach. I think I've seen enough mistakes in terms of signings, whether they be the actual players or the timing of the signing, that I didn't really like. I'm positive on that. But I do think that there are some criticisms or things to be wary about. The first one being, it is pretty early to do a signing, in the sense that there are still teams that could be letting go of their coaches. For example, Jim Curtin was just let go by Philadelphia Union. And with Miami's early exit in the playoffs, maybe even Tata Martino is going to be looking for a new place. So there's a lot of things that can still be shaken up. Are those coaches that I would necessarily prefer? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that at the time of making the signing, if the idea was to get someone with MLS experience, the options were limited. And the other thing to just be wary about in the short term is, and this is something that Bruce Arena said, that it's going to take time to make meaningful changes in this roster. And our roster is in a strange position where we've had basically 4 coaches already oversee it. Granted, 2 of them were interim coaches. But because of that, the identity of the team has changed a lot. And the kind of signings we've made haven't, like they've been for different reasons. And so not all the players that we currently have on the roster will be built into Bruce Arena's identity. There might be some dead weight for the first year or until whenever those contracts terminate or we can sell those players. So some limitations there, but in the long run, this should work out. Should Bruce Arena stay for those 4 or 5 years that he's recently been staying with other MLS clubs. But overall, I do think that I am more on the happy side with this signing.
Yeah, likewise. Not saying we're gonna go and win the MLS Cup and then win the treble next season, but
One
I
could
think
dream.
that, yeah, I mean, we can dream. I hope so, but it's a positive direction and it's a statement signing.
And only time will tell, and it'll be soon enough that we get to see this team playing in preseason and in the 2025 MLS season. So that's all from us on Bruce Arena. Of course, we'll have more once there's actually games to evaluate on. And if you made it this far, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you guys.